And is needed, are needed. Gotcha. Right. We'll note that as a friendly amendment.
So I'll invite the election commission to, we have sandwiches, water, and coffee. And then the assembly members will be joining us starting at noon, and they'll be sitting here at the table. So we'll have you folks right here.
You want us to stay in this?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
I'm gonna stick around. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here. At the end of the day.
Oh, I have you too. I have this too. Since the day of my first. Because I just didn't think it was anybody's business. I guard my social security number more than I guard around my stuff. You know what, for our, let me show you. For our rasps, the first, would it be cool to look at the seal them? And this, we could put the lower window and the back window and just do that. Sign them after they seem like good ideas. All right. Are we at the end of that?
Never went to do a taxi cab. Never asked that.
By the time we're done, it's gonna stand and run by itself.
Yeah, I got both. In case I didn't realize that they were running the span, the number.
Right, they did, well, this ordinance itself expands to 10 cabs per year for 10 years.
Well, I thought it was, I wanted to get it to written out, I'm thinking about the middle of the month.
And I find that,
And then I think we
get
would
Julian to start working.
done.
They say they were doing these things. They have 20 vehicles, went through the licenses, taxi cabs. I want to know why. If they carry people, they don't need the license. And we require them to have
We're working on it.
Cold out there. Yeah.
The ends kind of freeze up so that the USS Anchorage.
Maybe they could call an icebreaker in court.
Think so?
I'm leaving for Ohio in the morning, where the temperature is 77 degrees.
Oh, wonderful. More the merrier.
Some states are cold.
Right, I was glad to see the report on that one. Up in north of Columbus. We've got a couple of trash.
It's all there in the middle.
So on the baseball.
Why did you call us?
Wow. Man, I get a gavel and everything.
That's right.
I'm gonna be like training. Prerogative of the chair.
Could have explosive.
What's that?
Could have explosive load.
Did you see that?
Or riots in or whatever.
Mickey Mouse.
Nikki did well. How many did you get this year?
1,100 or something.
We need to get.
Well, other, I mean, it's not just Mickey. It's not free. There are troops. That's right.
No such. Bill's gonna run late. Chris will be here. Chris is out of town.
Crunchy, whatever it looks like. Potato chip.
Yes.
Don't squeeze it. Oh, don't squeeze it.
Elections committee, we go around and do roll call starting with Mr. Crane.
Dick Training Acres Assembly,
Tim Steele.
Pretty Hawley, just simply.
Out of Trombley Assembly.
Dennis, Wade, municipal attorney.
Amanda Moser, Deputy Municipal Clerk, Elections. Vicki, identify yourself.
Oh, how, did you want us to?
That's fine, since we're gonna be doing a review of the hand count, we might as well have the elections commission go ahead. Who was that again?
This is Patrick Quinn.
Oh, Patrick's on the phone.
Vicki Cantrell, Election Commission.
Alice Hamley, Election Commission.
Pete Strang, Election Commission.
Sue Kinney, Election Commission.
Roy Matthews, Chair, Election Commission.
First item on the agenda is the review of the hand count information.
This information was available on the back table. The way that the clerk's office set up the hand count, working with both campaigns along with the municipal attorney's office, was all ballots from the precincts were organized into 5 categories. Those categories were counted Ernie Hall, counted Nick Moe, counted write-in challenge, not counted write-in challenge, and other. Other included overvotes, double votes, Mickey Mouse, etc. Our counters would separate the ballots into the categories of counted Ernie Hall, counted Nick Moe, and other. The other would include both the ones that were overvotes, double votes, Mickey Mouse, and it would also include the ones that were contested by either campaign. The clerk would then come around to each table of counters and would review the ones that were challenged by each campaign and would decide the final if it was counted or not counted.
I wanted to note something for the record. That is, we received great cooperation from the campaigns. Obviously, the campaigns have a vested interest to make sure their points of view were heard, and sometimes that can get pretty contentious, but this is one of those situations where we really do appreciate how well the campaigns work together to make this process run smoothly. They had good suggestions on how to set up the process that we took into consideration and used. I also want to say that the clerk's office and the workers involved did a fantastic job. Had it not been for the work of those 3 different groups, the 2 campaigns and the clerk's office and the workers, it could have been a much more difficult, painful process, but it really went as well as could be. And a lot of the things that we learned, we're hopeful that we'll continue to go forward with, adopt as policy or where appropriate as code, because if we get in a situation again where we need to do either a hand count or a recount, some of the things that we learned in this process we should use again, because they worked really well.
If I could just let the record show that Ms. Gray Jackson has arrived.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In terms of the other things on the hand count, it seems to me that this space here is a little tight for some of the things that they have to do. It might be something to consider going forward if you had a little bit more space for that kind of a process. That might help as well. What the Election Commission has for you today is some recommendations, and one of those recommendations addresses security issues in terms of the ballots, in terms of voter identifiers primarily. When a voter fills out a question envelope or an absentee envelope, they have to include certain things that identify them personally, birthday, social security number, other things like that, in some combination. And that information is also available on the computer screens that the commission or the clerk refers to try to identify a voter. And we need more space to have that information available to the workers, but also make sure not too much of it is available to the observers and the watchers and so on, because what we don't want to do is get in a situation where voters are unnecessarily exposed to the possibility of identity theft, because those identifiers are there and available. So it's pretty tough to do some of that in this space because it's so small. But you want the observers to see the process but not see it too closely to see certain things, and you've got to figure out how to manage that. That's something to keep in mind.
Anything else regarding the hand count?
there's no questions.
Okay. Any questions?
Just the two precincts, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know about precinct 645, 660. Is there some reason why they were double the amount approximately of the other precincts? Any rational reason why, or just how they felt?
I think that through the chair, there's a lot of different reasons why there's a higher voter turnout in those precincts. Not all precincts have the same number of registered voters. Some precincts in the municipality have 3,000 registered voters, other precincts have 600. So there's a huge discrepancy across the municipality of Anchorage with the number of registered voters in a precinct. And also, some precincts have higher voter turnout than others. We had a precinct that had less than 1% voter turnout, and we had other precincts that had over 35%. So there's a lot of different factors that could lead to why numbers are significantly higher in some precincts than others.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just talking to somebody in the audience, and I'm bringing this up because I'm not quite sure what she's saying, okay? And she made a comment, let's look at precinct 455. Mr. Chairman, if we can allow her to tell us what she just told me, it would probably come across better than what I'm about to say.
That'd be fine.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Chair, thank you.
If you could just identify your,
My name is Carolyn Ramsey,
Okay.
and I was here for the entire day, Saturday, for the recount, and sat at a table for the recount in that specific
Okay.
corner. First precinct we counted was precinct 455. On the initial count that day, which was the ballots that came through the AccuVote machine, we had a total of 90 for Hall, and Nick Moe had a total of 118. Now, how they can be subtracted on the vote count, I don't understand. I can see adding more votes for absentee and question ballots, but I can't understand the subtraction.
okay.
We'll have to, sorry, I thought I was in the assembly for a second. We'd have to go back and look at the tally sheets that that table worked and see what those numbers are.
That was the tally sheet.
Yeah, but I don't have an answer without looking at those.
If you could provide an answer and
Sure.
provide that to Ms. Gray Jackson and actually send it to everybody, we'd appreciate it. That way we can get that to our constituents who are concerned about that. Any other questions? Okay. Item number 3, the clerk's office election update.
Through the chair, if I may take a few moments to talk
Sure.
about the 2013 election along with our plans for 2014. We made a lot of changes for the 2013 election. We were really pleased with the way a lot of things went. The one major change that we did was we revamped our training program. In the past, we have had 4 training sessions held at the Lusac Library to train our 600 election workers. Each training session had anywhere from 100 to 150 plus workers in it. In a big space, it was very difficult to hear. It was hard to see the PowerPoint along with the presentation. One thing the clerk's office did was we broke those 4 training sessions into 16 training sessions. We had each training session was limited to 40 election workers, and we had the opportunity to engage almost one-on-one with all election workers. We did, for 8 days straight, 2 training sessions a day. We were able to connect with the election workers and address concerns that they brought up throughout the training. We've had really strong positive feedback about this, and we're looking to expand on it for next year. We're currently discussing maybe dividing the trainings into returning election workers along with new election workers. New election workers do need additional information. The municipality of Anchorage is really fortunate. We have a lot of really experienced election workers. One thing I discovered doing the training is I asked all the election workers how long they've been working with the city. I realized that I've been here with elections, this was my 4th election, but we have workers that have been working with the city since 1957, before Alaska was even a state. So there's just a ton of really great experience with those election workers. And they might need a little bit of a less intense training program than someone who's a brand new election worker. So I think for next year, we're looking at breaking our training program into new election workers and then having streamlined training program for our returning experienced election workers.
If I could just interrupt for something I could show, Ms. Dombrowski's arrived.
One thing that we've recognized is there's a lot of good systems in place, but we are looking, as we move forward, to refine them. We are looking to continuously review all of our manuals along with create new manuals. One thing we discovered this year is we don't have an absentee polling location worker training manual. So this summer, our office is going to work on creating one of those with some of our really experienced absentee polling place workers. We have some workers who have been working absentee for 10, 15 years. So the clerk's office will sit down with them this summer and work on that. Our other major goal that we would like to work on as we move forward is we'd like to increase voter turnout. This election, we saw 20.15% registered voters turn out and vote on election day. We'd like to engage more of the city in the municipal election process. And so the clerk's office is reviewing ways that we can do that. This year, for the first time, or we hadn't done it in a while, we created a ballot review. They're available in the back if you're interested in looking at them. The League of Women Voters created it. We sent it out as part of the Anchorage Daily newspaper. We'd like to find ways that we can distribute it to more residents within the municipality of Anchorage, not just folks who receive the newspaper. One idea that the clerk's office is going to investigate is we would like to send out perhaps a postcard to all residents within the municipality of Anchorage, notifying them of upcoming elections, of the upcoming election. So perhaps send it out in January, notifying them of the upcoming election in April, reminding people to register to vote and to look up where their polling place was. We every year see quite a few folks turning out to the polling places that are either not registered voters or they have moved and have not updated their registration, and this leads to issues with processing their vote as far as if they are an eligible voter. So we'd like to work with the city to engage them as far as updating registration and visiting their correct polling places. So I think the clerk's office will be working a lot on voter education. And the last thing that we really want to work on is our youth election assistant program. We have it in code that we can hire youth election workers age 16 to 18 to work at polling places on election day. It's a really great opportunity to get practical experience, to become familiar with municipal elections, get real world experience, and we would like to have a youth election assistant at every single polling place for the 2014 election. So we'll be working with the schools during the summer and the fall as far as engaging the youth in this program and getting more students signed up for it.
Any questions? I do have one, and that's in regards to absentee ballots.
Yes.
Could you just explain, I know there are some security challenges with giving out to campaigns addresses of people who are gone. Could you just explain the new process that you guys did this year with campaigns requesting absentee ballot addresses?
Yes.
And why you've done it that way?
And I might refer to Dennis at points to this too. This was a decision that was made last year with the 2012 election. Campaigns have requested in the past to receive a list of all voters who request an absentee by mail ballot. In the past, we have distributed a list that has the voter's residence address along with their ballot address and precincts and all that information. We've found that it's a security risk releasing information if someone is out of town. It's clearly obvious if they're requesting a ballot to another location that they might not be at their home. So we have, this year and in 2012, only sent out the residence address to the campaigns that request these, along with the voter's name and the precinct that they're registered in.
So there's a couple competing interests here. One, we're looking to make sure that campaigns have the opportunity to confirm whether a voter is a qualified voter. The campaigns in their hand may be interested in trying to mail their materials to the voter. So we're focused on making sure that the campaigns have access to the voter name and where they reside, whereas they're sometimes interested in where the person is right now. And there's a lot of reasons why somebody may not want their vacation address or their address where their mother lives and they're staying right now because they got in a domestic violence situation. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they may not want that ballot mailing address available to campaigns or anybody. And there's a provision that allows them to check mark, right? To check mark or check block so they can keep it secure.
That's for the residents.
For the residents. So it was our opinion that we should not be providing that information because it doesn't have anything to do with validating whether the person's a qualified voter.
Have you received, is this a reaction to widespread communication from the public to the clerk's office saying, hey, how are these people getting how are campaigns getting my address, where I'm at? Was this predicated on anything, or was this just this internal decision that was made?
I don't remember what the backdrop was, but I remember we got the legal request from the clerk's office asking
Okay.
us what they're required to disclose.
So was there widespread complaint from the public? Is that what kind of sparked it, or was it just an internal decision that was made?
I wasn't part of the conversation last year when the decision was made. My guess would be that a lot of voters don't realize that that information is made public. So I think, there would be concerns if it is just made public without the voters being aware of that.
Mr. Cohen? Yes.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, did you say that the check to say I do not want it released is for the home address only?
So that is part of when you register to become a voter, you can, on the voter registration form, mark a box that says that you do not want your residence address to be public, and you have to put a different address, PO box or something, and then that's. The clerk's office has had a conversation. We have talked to the chair of the Ethics and Election Committee about when we redo our voter absentee by mail request form, that we can allow the voter to determine if they want their information to be made available to the public, that they've requested a ballot by mail. And then it can be in the voter to decide if they want that information released to the public.
I think that would be a better idea, just because what you do is you deny them, I know it's not always considered a positive, but you deny them the ability to get campaign information while they're away from home to help make their decision. So there's two sides to that coin. But if they have an option to opt out of receiving that material.
And we try and balance those to the voters' need for privacy along with the campaigns. Yeah, we try and do that. So, our election commission is going to discuss some code changes, and I would just like to take a moment to highlight two things that they're going to discuss. When we, throughout this election cycle, we realized pretty early that currently as the code is written, you have to request a by fax ballot 7 days before election day. And as we approached that 7-day deadline, our office received an increased number of requests for absentee both by mail and by fax ballots. And then after the deadline, our office was contacted by members of the public who, for various reasons, got pulled out of the state and were not going to be here on election day. Our code does not allow us to assist that voter in any way to get a ballot. Currently, you have to request it 7 days before. And so the clerk's office strongly supports changing that deadline to the day before the election to allow for voters who, for various reasons, are pulled out of state or have something that prevents them from making it to the polls on election day. We would like that to be more easily available to get a ballot. And the other thing that the election commission is going to present is this year we had 12 votes that were not counted because because an election official had failed to attest the envelope. We spent every training class, we covered the process of issuing question ballots. We discussed signing the envelope, and for whatever reason, 12 times on election day, election workers did not sign that question ballot envelope, and those votes were not counted. We think that this should be something that could be cured, something that could be fixed, if the election official perhaps signed. There's a statement on the front of the register, if they sign that should count as the signature on the envelope. We don't think that votes should not be counted because of sort of an oversight on the part of an election worker.
Question for you. Relative to the write-in ballots we have this time, there are many people that called me concerned because they felt they were disenfranchised because the oval was not filled in correctly, they put an X in it. Or they just put the name down which shows voter intent. Are we gonna address that issue? Because I think we really need to.
I can speak to one part of that, just a clarification. If a voter puts an X through the oval, the AccuVote machine will read that as a filled-in oval. So those votes, if it had an X or any sort of mark in the oval
So
were.
it didn't have to be filled in correctly, because I heard Dennis Wheeler say that it'd be filled in correctly, completely.
I did say that, but correctly means there's a number, there's like 5 or 6 different ways that you can fill it in. Completely color it in, put check marks in it, a dash, X. You gotta put something in the oval enough that it can be read.
Can we
Your
make
check
that
mark,
available to the public, Dennis?
yeah, it's out there, it's in the state's published materials. It was handed out to all the workers when we did the hand count. The campaigns have that information.
We'll put it up on our website under the elections page, just so it's more readily available to the public.
The thing, some of the people that called me, Amanda, were concerned because they said voter intent, if they put the name there, that's who they wanted, because they took the time to fill the name in. But if they didn't fill in the oval, it wouldn't have counted?
That's right.
We
That's right.
provide instructions in all of the voting booths. There is a how to vote poster that is displayed at all of our 120 polling places across the municipality, and it clearly states on that poster that in order for the vote to count, that the oval needs to be filled in. But we saw issues like this coming up as we did the hand count, and I do think it's an important part of our voter education that I spoke about earlier. And, we can work with the League of Women Voters as they make our form for next year. Maybe we can include more information in this about voting and have it, information here that the oval needs to be filled in for the vote to count.
If you would, please, because I don't want voters to be disenfranchised.
I agree, I
If we
agree.
don't give enough information.
So we will work on that
Thank you,
educational
Amanda.
piece.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 12 votes that didn't count because of one of the workers didn't sign, I'm assuming that that's the law. Yeah, because that really concerns me, because if it was my vote and somebody forgot to sign, people make mistakes, I would be really pissed. And so, with that said, we really need to do something to fix that, because 12 votes are 12 votes, and like I said, if it was mine, my vote didn't count. Uh-oh. But
So-
anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On that point, what we discovered was that the state had changed its law in 2001 for that very reason. The state recognized there was a problem with the thousands of election workers that they used. Somebody can miss signing off on the envelope, so they changed it. We haven't, and the commission wants you to make that change as part of their.
Oh, okay, so this, okay.
They have a
Okay, well, good.
resolution.
I'm glad
This is on the list.
glad that you
Yes.
agree,
Yeah,
because it
it's
was
on the
gonna be
list.
my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Sorry, go ahead.
No, but it's a good segue into letting the commission present you their resolution.
Go ahead.
We have several resolutions that we would recommend to you this year. You have a copy of it, I believe, in front of you, don't you?
No.
Yes.
No. Oh, here we go.
I won't read all of it, but I want to kind of identify A through E. For us, the biggest concern that we had was the security of identifiers for the voters. This wasn't as secure as what we would like. And we want to bring it into code and state it so it can be enforced. We recommend that any poll watchers should be residents of the state of Alaska and be required to sign confidentiality oaths, subject to criminal penalties to ensure and protect against identity theft through access to voter information. Because when we verify all of the question or the mail-in or the absentee, if they're close enough to see the screen, all of those identifiers are on there, and that is not good. Adopting these into code would provide ready access to the rules by the public and provide an enforcement mechanism if the rules are violated. To the maximum extent allowed by law, voter personal identifiers should not be visible to observers and watchers, which is also in the state code and state law as well. The Assembly should enact code to prohibit close observation or capture of personal identifiers, which far enough away so they cannot read those, they cannot capture it with recording devices or backpacks, writing it down, one of those things. That is, I think, I speak for all of us, that is the one we're most concerned about. B there is the fax question that Amanda already addressed. We believe that it should be allowed to register a day before. That allows time for the transfer back and forth, but sometimes you're called out when you don't know it. C establishes, this year we had to make a decision on cross-district and cross-precinct voting. I'll just read that one. The municipality should establish a clear rule on question ballot cross-district and cross-precinct voting, aka out-of-district or out-of-precinct voting. Efficient and accurate elections require people to vote in their home precincts or go to the absentee polling places so they are given the right ballots. Cross-district and cross-precinct voting adds to the workload of administering the election, increases the chances of human error in the results, and calls into question the voter's intent. However, we recognize there are circumstances where a voter ends up in the wrong place, and we do want to encourage them to vote. However, the consequence of voting cross-district or cross-precinct should be clear. Some votes on that ballot will not be counted. Area-wide races, school board, area-wide bonds, etc. are counted, but certain other votes cannot and should not be counted because the voter is either ineligible to vote those issues or there is no proper place for the voter to clearly demonstrate their intent. For example, a voter who resides in District 1 and votes at a precinct in District 2 cannot have their vote on the ballot for District 2 assembly race counted. And a District 1 voter who writes in a District 1 candidate on the District 2 assembly race ballot cannot have that vote counted for either race. Making this clear now will avoid uncertainty and litigation in the future. The municipal clerk's office supports a clear rule. D is concerning the identifiers that are required on the envelopes. Do you want me to read that, or I can read that to you? Which ones, well, I'll just read it. For current question and absentee ballot envelope forms require personal identifiers such as social security number, birth date, voter ID number, driver's license number, or state identification number. This information is used by the municipal clerk's office and the elections commission to verify that a voter is qualified. The envelope forms may require more identifiers than are needed, and there could be more clarity as to when certain identifiers are enough to accept a ballot for counting. The municipal clerk's office believes this request can be addressed administratively in conjunction with the State of Alaska Division of Elections. And E addresses what Ms. Jackson was talking about. Question ballot envelopes are required to be signed not only by the voter, but also an election official. And it gives the code there. Usually the election official is a poll worker. Every year there are some envelopes that are mistakenly not signed by election officials. This year there were 11 ballots rejected because they were not signed by the election official. The state of Alaska changed its law so that this failure through no fault of the voter would not result in the rejection of the ballot. We recommend the municipality create a similar exemption. The municipal clerk's office supports this code change as well.
Thank you for the report. Any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May
what is, the process when you hand out a question ballot now? Because it has to be signed. I heard you say there was some sort of something on the front that they write.
So there's a couple processes, there are a couple things. First, the voter will come in and they will sign a question ballot register. Voters are voting question ballots for various reasons. A lot of times they're voting question ballots because they're voting out of precinct, so their name isn't in the precinct register where you would sign it if you were a regular voter. The question voter signs the register. On the front sheet of that register, there's an area for the election workers to sign who have been issuing question ballots. Then the voter fills out the question ballot envelope, which asks for their name, their residence address. It asks for identifiers, which is one of the things that's in here. And then it asks for the voter to sign it. And then at the bottom of that page, or the envelope, there's an area for the workers to fill out. It requires the workers to sign it and put some additional information as to why the voter is voting the question ballot.
So then the election worker actually is supposed to fill that out before the voter actually votes. Ideally. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
I have two questions on letter B. How does that, you have to kind of bear with me just because you understand this process far better than I do, is that if I request an absentee ballot, it's mailed to. So when you do it by fax, usually the absentee ballots have to be post-dated by the day of the election, correct, in order for them to be valid. So if the clerk's office gets a request the day before and they mail it out, or do you send that absentee ballot by fax? Is that how?
So to request a ballot by mail or by fax, you fill out an application. It's a separate application.
Sure.
If you're requesting a ballot by mail or if you're requesting it by fax. We think if this code change happens, the clerk's office will be able to contact voters who request one by mail and miss the 7-day deadline, that they can arrange to get one by fax instead.
So you'll fax them the absentee
Yeah,
ballot?
currently, we'll receive them after the deadline, and we make an attempt to contact the voter and let them know that they've missed the deadline and we are unable to send them a ballot, but.
I understand.
The interesting thing about this is if they fax back the ballot or email it in, however that's going to be set up, is they actually acknowledge that they're exposing their vote in a way that most other voters don't have to deal with, because it's not in a sleeve or an envelope or anything like that. So, but we want to make sure they get the chance to vote, and I think we can help a few people out with changing this.
One thing that the clerk's office did this year, we had concerns with the way that the absentee by fax ballots were dealt with previously. Previously, they were printed in the clerk's office and brought to the by mail board that processes them, which, transporting these ballots that have no envelope, we had some serious concerns on the security of that. So we, this year, have set up a secure fax line that only the by mail board has access to. We provided them with a computer and a printer so that they handle all the by fax applications and voted ballots. They're not transported any way throughout the municipality. It's just in one secure room. So in order to lessen that confidentiality of the ballots.
Okay. And then dealing with it administratively, it sounds like from the recommendation from the commission is that it doesn't actually require a code change?
Or which?
For E, because you said that it's,
E.
I'm sorry, yeah, no, E. Oh, I'm sorry, not a
I
code
think
change.
it's looking at number D, the last line in number D. Or letter
Yes,
D.
I'm sorry, it is D, yep. Is that gonna be a challenge for you since we just do it administratively? Is that just a change that you guys make?
I think we're just gonna set up work with the municipal attorney's office to set up clear guidelines as to what is required.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Still, and then Mr. Hall.
Yeah, we need to start thinking about how we're going to do it online, electronically as well, because that's coming down the pike. And I know there's probably some jurisdictions that already allow that. So that would be something I would think we'd want to start looking at least.
One thing that the clerk's office began to look into this year is email. We are finding that people have less availability with fax machines. So if there was a way that someone could email about that, so that's an excellent suggestion, and it's something that we will continue to look at.
We'll be voting with our iPhones.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Hall?
I just want to express a real appreciation to the Election Commission. You know, after you've gone through a couple of these, you realize how many moving parts there are to an election, how many hands touch these ballots, how many people are involved. So, you know, that possibility of human error is very high. And anytime that, you know, we see you come up with recommendations like this, we take these very seriously. Anything that we can do to avoid anything that occurs during an election that causes a ballot not to be counted, we want to work to correct that. So you've already heard a couple of our members say, I'm definitely going to take care of that one. I think you'll find some of us will pick up each and every one of these and make sure that we do take this into consideration and make accommodations for this during our next election. But anytime you pick that up, thank you for sharing that with us, because I have no idea what goes on your side of the election, and honestly, I'm not sure that I could comprehend it if I went over to that side. But thank you for what you do, and particularly for pointing things like this out to us.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
You
I
wanna
have
comment
you,
on that?
Patrick.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Alan.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. A constituent asked me this question, and, you know, I need to ask the question when we're in this meeting. And she said to me, well, find out what their thoughts on having each election be hand counted, period. And so, and I know that it's expensive, but I want to hear what your response is so that I can share it with her. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What was that?
To whoever wants to answer it.
The clerk's office has had the conversation, starting this summer with Barbara Jones becoming the municipal clerk, of ways that we can ensure the security of our election and the accountability. And one thing that we've discussed and we're looking at implementing is having a board that does a random hand count of precincts after the election. And that's something that we will continue to look into implementing for the 2014 election. I don't know the logistics of doing a hand count across the municipality. Having been involved in the hand count that we did in 2012 and 2013, I do know that it is a timely process, and hand counting the entire election would perhaps push certification back, but I can't speak to other logistics besides that.
It was basically one day to count one district, one race. So when you're trying to tally all the races on a ballot, both sides, and then do that across all the districts, that'd be quite an undertaking,
Right.
time and expense-wise.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, Amanda, I really appreciate the fact that the clerk is, at the very least, looking at doing a random hand
Yeah.
count. That's a really, really good idea, and I look forward to sharing your comments with my constituent.
The state, and by statute, the state does that very thing, and it's kind of funny phrasing, but let's just say it's 5% of so many districts, or like 5% of the precincts and 1 or 2 randomly selected House districts, or something like that. They do it every year.
Are you done, Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up Mr. Spiel's comment. For good or for ill, I'm a shareholder in any number of companies around the world, and they have a proxy vote service that is obviously very highly regulated, but it is available online. It may be a model that we can, say, borrow or steal from for the absentee voting online system that he alluded to. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
one
Chairman.
question for Amanda, if you don't mind. Amanda, what would a single question citywide cost? Let's say we have a referendum. I know what you've said, but it'll go to court. But what would a single issue cost the voters of Anchorage? Notwithstanding all the legal
Yeah.
stuff, just what it
Well,
costs.
we did a rough number one time at saying, let's say you're gonna have 600 workers, and they're gonna be working the polls for, what is it, 14, 16 hours?
16
At
hours.
$12 an hour,
$10.
$10 an hour, just got a pay cut. $10 an hour, then you got the training, whatever the training's gonna be, then, and the ballot prep, I don't know what the ballot prep costs for a
We-
one-sided ballot, not a two-sided ballot.
We, it would be about
$6,000 for the ballots.
To prep.
To prep.
And then to print the ballots would be, probably about $60,000.
One time we forget about $120,000.
I think it would be more than that, because I think that even the cost of hiring the election workers is, I wanna say it's over $200,000, $300,000. We've been using ESS, to hire our election workers. You know, we pay a fee as a contract for the outsourcing that. We hire a moving company that delivers all of the equipment to our 120 precincts. I think we pay them somewhere around $15,000 to do that. And that's sort of just the big things, not including, you know, all the small logistics along the way. We each year have to replace supplies to our 120 precincts across the board.
So you think at 200,000, 300,000?
I think we're looking closer to 300,000.
I will share with you that when I was reviewing the budget at the end of the year, looking at next year's budget, the number the clerk gave me was 380.
380, okay.
Mr. Jackson?
Because inevitably, if that comes up, we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna fund it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just gonna follow up on what Mr. Hall just said, and Mr. Training's question. The budget for the election has consistently been around 350. Yeah, on average, consistently, so, yeah, anyways.
Yeah, unfortunately, a single issue, there's not much savings in that versus a full ballot.
Yeah.
Other than maybe the printing could go double-sided, but after that, it's
I don't even think we pay for the paper.
paper to paper, so unfortunately, there's no savings there.
Any other questions? I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn, could you send some information to me about what you're talking about, the proxy for online? I'd like to go over that with the committee.
Yeah, happy to do that, Adam. It's actually just proxyvote.com.
Easy enough.
I get periodic emails from to vote in electing the directors, appointing auditors, the compensation program, things of that nature that shareholders get to vote on.
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that obviously all of us are very concerned about elections, and we want to make sure that everything goes right, and we certainly want to take into account every recommendation that you guys have made to us, that the commission has made to us. I just ask that any changes to Title 28 go through the committee, just so we can weed out duplicates. And not that I want to prevent anything from coming to the floor, I just want to make sure that we're not bringing multiple things to the floor and overwhelming Julia at the same time. So, because I know she's very good with client confidentiality, and she usually doesn't share if people are working on the same thing. So that would be my only request, and I'll have another committee meeting. I'll look at some dates, and we'll get the recommendations and the code changes. And I'd also like you to be involved in those committee meetings as we do make those recommended changes to code, so that you guys can look at the language and see if that's acceptable, if that would meet your guys' needs in the future. So, Mr. Wheeler?
Your hand was up first, but after, yeah.
Go ahead.
The plan, unless the assembly wants to give us other direction, the plan was for my office and the clerk's office to present what I'll call for lack of a better term, omnibus Title 28, that takes into account this resolution and other things that we see need to be cleaned up and addressed. So that was the plan. We don't have a particular time frame other than I personally would like to see it in front of you no later than this summer so we can get it done, so we can get pre-clearance taken care of if need be.
That's fine. That's fine. I'd also like to work, we'll probably more likely have a work session on that anyway, so that's fine. Mr. Ed Jackson was, and then I'll have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I may, somebody else in the audience had a question or comment, and it'd be better just coming directly from them than me trying to repeat it, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeannie Friedman. And I was just curious about clarifying some aspects of the code. As we recall from our 2012 election, there were a number of code violations based on procedure. And since that point in time, we haven't actually clarified code language so that those errors won't occur again. I'd like to cite 3 different examples that may be of interest to individuals. But, you know, in addition to, for instance, the creation of facsimiles, our code specifically states that the facsimiles that are created are to be numbered based on the original ballot as it's cast. So explicitly written in code right now, a created facsimile has to be numbered with the ballot that was cast in order to have a chain of events that we can follow and keep track of that ballot. And so that's something in the code that whether it needs to be clarified or changed, but it should probably be addressed. Another aspect of the code that we're wondering about is this idea of a write-in candidate. Currently, I believe the state law, and perhaps Mr. Wheeler can address this, but if I cast a ballot at the state level and I've bubbled in, for instance, on this last assembly election, I bubble in Mr. Hall's name, and I've actually completed that ballot correctly, but then I go into the write-in line and I bubble in the write-in line correctly, and I also write in Mr. Hall's name, and I have his name in 2 different places. My vote won't count because the current municipal code states that can only be written in once, or can only have 1 bubble. And since I had bubbled twice, even though the same name appears, that vote won't count. So that's an area of clarification that we may want to address. And then a third one is just generally perhaps the specific way of handling our elections. I know that our Title 28 is very vague when it comes to certain points of law in terms of how the elections are handled. My recommendation, and a group of people who have been kind of tracking the process, is to be more specific and more explicit within the code. It may be burdensome in the code, but it will allow for some very clear decisions to be made in the future regarding how the procedure changes, or excuse me, who the the leadership in the assembly in future years, so we don't have to keep beating this drum each and every year. And for instance, I'll give you another example. As a write-in candidate, there's some vague identifiers as to what considered a positive write-in candidate. So if we have a write-in election, as we did on this last one, where perhaps Mr. Hall was running as the write-in, the clerk right now can create a subjective condition as to what names would be acceptable for that write-in candidate. So for instance, based on some of the clerk's examples from this last election, Mr. Hall's name would be accepted, perhaps Mr. Hale's name would be accepted, Mr. Help's name would be accepted, so any name with an H beginning. But for instance, if I voted for Mr. Ball with a B beginning, that wouldn't be accepted as a ballot. So on the flip side of this, with Mr. Moe's campaign, as he was being written in, so anything that went with an M, like a Mo, Neil, or excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of the first name. Nick was the first name, and I couldn't remember that, I apologize. So anything starting with an N for Nick was fine. So it was Nick, Neil, different variations of Nick, anything starting with an N, but things starting with like Rick Moe wasn't acceptable, and Dick Moe wasn't acceptable. And so we have a vagueness in our code that allows some subjectivity based on how it's interpreted. So if we were to be more explicit in our definition in our code as to, for instance, grammatical, or whether it had to be phonetic, or if it had to be within a certain letter range of a name, that would alleviate some of the pressure from the clerk's office in the future, and perhaps streamline and cost having the election process actually cost less in the end, rather than keep going over this over and over again and subject, for changing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wheeler?
Just real quick, as the first one, I'm numbering the facsimiles, I think that's certainly doable. Number 2, our overvote treatment, where somebody's colored in the oval for the candidate and written and then colored that oval. We are different from the state in that we don't count those, I think the state does, but the trigger is when are you gonna see those? You're only gonna see those or deal with those if there's some kind of a recount or hand count, right? Because you're not gonna know what's going on with that until you actually get to see it. So, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, you won't see unless there's a hand count or a recount, so we'd have to figure out how to deal with that one. Not that it's not doable, but you're likely not to see the impact of that unless you're in a really close race where somebody wants a hand count. On the third one, that's a tough one. I see her point. Somebody has to, and this is why in the Murkowski case, the court was very happy that Gail made all the calls, rather than have one board make a call and a different board make a call that was different. They really appreciated the fact that it was one person making the decision. What we did is we looked at the Murkowski case and came up with our best guess as to what would be included and what wouldn't be, and we gave that to the clerk to use. At least by doing that, we identified up front what would and wouldn't be counted. That way the campaigns could make their challenges, knowing that if there was a really bad misspelling or if something was really phonetically off, that it wouldn't be counted. We could segregate those, so the court could say later, oh, well, if it's Nick, N-I-K, that's not spelled right, but it's close enough. But if it's Neil, those weren't counted. The court, we can tell how many votes are there for Neil. And it's pretty easy for the court to say, okay, those 5 are counted or those 5 stay out. So I think the key there is not necessarily to put in a long laundry list of rules about how many letters have to be there, but rules that say, here's the process, that before the count begins, the clerk needs to identify what variations would and wouldn't be counted, so the campaigns can then easily see where they need to make their challenges, and at the end, you have a good count for the court to look at and make a decision on. So that was just my 2 cents worth. Focus on the process, not so much the choices, because then the process allows the campaigns to make the right challenges at the right time.
Okay. Mr. Trainee? Nothing?
Real quick question, thank you. Amanda, you said you were gonna work with Mr. Wheeler on some changes. Are you gonna add our attorney from the assembly into it, since elections come underneath the clerk's office? You report to the assembly, you're gonna have our attorney work on it too with you?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I just wanna make sure she's not left out, because she did a lot of work after last year's election. I just wanna make sure her input's into what we develop. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, we're adjourned.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Run everything.
Thank you, Adam.
Good challenge.